Horror. 2 years after walking away and saying he didn't need a family, he saw her with a child who had his eyes, and everything changed. Gabriel Stone was the kind of man you read about in magazines. Rich, brilliant, untouchable. At just 34, he had risen through the ranks of New York's most powerful financial elite, and now sat at the top as CEO of Stone Holdings, an international investment firm with clients on every continent. His schedule was packed to the minute. He flew first class, ate alone, slept little, and trusted no one. Relationships were a distraction to him. Family was a weakness he couldn't afford. In his eyes, love softened men, and soft men didn't survive in his world. Amelia Cole lived in a completely different universe. At 20, she was still paying off art school loans and shared a loft with 2 other struggling creatives in Brooklyn. She painted by day and worked as an interior design assistant at night just to get by. Despite the chaos, she radiated hope. Her dream was simple: to open her own gallery, sell enough art to live modestly, and find someone who saw beauty not only in her work, but in her. She believed in love like a child believes in fairy tales, completely, without a doubt. Their worlds collided by sheer chance. Amelia had been hired through a small design firm to help style the reception area of the new Stone Holdings office in Manhattan. It was supposed to be a 2-week job, light, decorative touches. Never was it supposed to be that Gabriel Stone would show up, much less that he would stand behind her one afternoon and comment on her choice of light fixtures. "Too soft," he'd said, his arms crossed, his voice curt. She had turned, startled, and met a pair of dark, penetrating brown eyes, so intense they almost made her forget how to breathe. She disagreed with him immediately and boldly. Too soft for what? For an office or for your ego? He had laughed, and for the first time in years, something in him had cracked open. It wasn't just her looks, though she was stunning, with ice blonde hair and clear blue eyes. It was her courage. She didn't flinch under pressure. She didn't try to impress him. She challenged him. Intrigued, he offered to take her to dinner. "Strictly professional," he said, but they both knew it wouldn't stay that way. Dinners turned into nights, nights into weekends. They lived in a bubble of stolen time, where he taught her how to relax, and she taught him how to feel. For 3 months, they balanced on the edge of something neither of them had expected, something terrifying and real. But just as it began to feel solid, something permanent, Gabriel pulled back. One quiet morning, with golden light pouring through the windows of Amelia's apartment, he stood near the balcony, his hands in his pockets. She was still curled in bed, drowsy and smiling. That's when he said it. "I don't need a family, Amy. That's not me. I can't be what you need." His voice was flat, rehearsed. It sounded like another person was speaking through him. She sat up. Confusion turned to pain, but he was already pulling on his jacket. There was no argument, no goodbye. Just silence as he closed the door behind him and walked out of her life. Amelia didn't cry immediately. She just sat there, in that sun-drenched, half-lit room, wondering what she had missed. How someone could touch your soul one day and walk away the next as if nothing mattered. She didn't know that would be the last time she would see him, for a very long time. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories. The unspoken truth. Amelia never heard from Gabriel again. No calls, no texts, not even a cold corporate email. It was as if he had deleted her in the same way he deleted unprofitable projects from his life, without a second thought. For the first few days after he left, she was numb. She kept thinking maybe he would come back. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe he was afraid. But time passed, and all those maybes became a silence that filled her apartment like a fog. She tried to paint, but the canvas remained blank. Her hands wouldn't move. Her colors no longer made sense. 2 weeks later, barefoot in her tiny apartment bathroom, she stared at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She blinked, then looked again, as if the result might change if she stared hard enough. Her heart was pounding, but her body remained frozen. Everything inside her fought between disbelief and a rising panic. She sat down on the cold tile floor, wrapping her arms around her knees, and let the truth wash over her. She was pregnant, with Gabriel Stone's child. For hours, she just sat there, unmoving, barely breathing. It wasn't just the shock of becoming a mother. It was the overwhelming knowledge that she would have to do it alone. The man who had looked into her eyes and touched her heart had also told her, without hesitation, that he didn't want a family. She could still hear him say it, like a cruel echo. "That's not me." Well, this was her now. At first, she thought about calling him. She even drafted a message one night. "I need to tell you something. Please call me." But she didn't send it. She imagined how it would go, how he would react, or worse, how he wouldn't. What if he told her to get an abortion? What if he offered her money and nothing else? What if he said nothing at all? She deleted the message and promised herself she would not beg a man to be a father. A week later, Amelia packed her bags and left New York. There was nothing left for her there, not the apartment that still smelled faintly of his cologne, nor the streets that reminded her of him on every corner. She took the train north to Vermont, where her aunt, Helen, had a small farm on the outskirts of a quiet town called Maple Hill. The air was clean, the people were kind, and most importantly, no one knew her there. It was a place to disappear and start over. Months passed slowly, each one marked by nausea, exhaustion, and the quiet ache of missing something that had never quite belonged to her. Helen became her rock. She never asked questions she knew Amelia wasn't ready to answer. Together, they prepared a nursery in a spare room overlooking the apple orchard. Amelia painted the walls a soft blue-gray and filled it with light, hoping her child would never feel the darkness she had known. When Oliver was born on a misty March morning, the world seemed to stop. He came into her arms screaming, imperfectly, with a head full of dark brown hair and eyes so deep and so familiar that Amelia gasped. He didn't just look like Gabriel. He was a mirror. She held him tightly against her chest and cried for the first time in months. Not because she was afraid, not because she was alone, but because she had never in her life felt a love so overwhelming. She named him Oliver Elias Cole and signed the birth certificate with trembling hands. There was no father's name, just her own. She had chosen this. She would raise him alone, every sleepless night, every lullaby, every bottle. He was hers. And even when she was exhausted to the bone and her hands were covered in paint or formula or tears, she never regretted having him. Still, sometimes in the quiet of the night, when Oliver was curled asleep against her and the farm was completely still, she wondered if Gabriel ever thought of her, if he would ever know what he missed, if he would look into a child's eyes one day and recognize something that was once his. But she didn't allow herself to stay in those thoughts for long. She had Oliver now. That was enough. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have told him the truth? Comment your thoughts below. The ghost of a past. Gabriel Stone was on the 57th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, looking out at the city he once conquered with ruthless precision. The skyline hadn't changed, but something inside of him had. He didn't know when it started. Maybe it was after the 3rd consecutive sleepless night, or the 5th time he closed a $1 billion deal and felt absolutely nothing. He had the penthouse, the awards, the respect of every boardroom he walked into. But lately, the silence of his own success had become deafening. No one questioned his decisions, no one challenged his vision, and no one touched his heart. Not since her. For a long time, he tried to push Amelia from his mind. He buried her memory under 12-hour workdays, meaningless business dinners, and expensive distractions. He told himself it had been a short fling, nothing more. But the truth gnawed at him during the quiet hours. The way she had looked at him without expectation, the way she had laughed when he was being too serious, how she had once painted a thunderstorm just because he said he hated the rain. She had seen through the sharp suits and the polished power. She had loved him before he even knew what love was. And he had thrown it all away with a single sentence. He hadn't even realized how much he missed her until he stopped pretending that he didn't. The change started slowly. He stopped accepting invitations to after-hours events. He turned down vacations with acquaintances he didn't care about. He found himself staring out of windows more than at board reports. He was losing his focus, and his assistant was starting to notice. She gently suggested he take a sabbatical, but the thought of walking away from his empire terrified him more than the emptiness itself. So he stayed, going through the motions of a life he no longer felt connected to. On a rainy October afternoon, he attended a charity auction hosted by one of the Stone Holdings affiliated foundations. He wasn't interested in the event, but appearances mattered, and he needed to remind the press that he was still in control. As he walked past a display of donated artwork, something stopped him. A painting hung on the wall, a forest in early winter, cold light filtering through the bare trees, and in the distance, a small figure walking alone. The name beneath the piece made his heart jolt. Amelia Cole. He moved closer, his eyes scrutinizing the brushstrokes, the colors, the movement. It was unmistakably her style. Raw, emotional, deeply alive. She had always painted as if she were bleeding feelings onto the canvas, and this piece was no exception. The ache in the image reached him in a way nothing else had in years. A woman near the painting noticed his attention and smiled. Beautiful, isn't it? She's a small-town artist from Vermont. Just opened a little gallery up north. Single mother, I think. Quite a story. Gabriel felt his entire body freeze. The words echoed in his mind. Single mother. Vermont. It couldn't be, but somehow it made too much sense. When he got home that night, he sat alone in his living room and looked her up online. He found the gallery easily. It had a modest website with grainy photos, upcoming exhibition dates, and a page dedicated to the artist behind the canvas. There she was, smiling with a soft tiredness in her eyes, standing next to a small boy who looked no older than 2. The boy had dark brown hair, a serious expression, and eyes that almost took his breath away. His eyes. Gabriel stared at the screen in a stunned silence. He scrolled down the page, hoping for a caption, something that would confirm what he already felt deep in his gut. One image showed the boy holding a tiny paintbrush, daubing color on a paper, while Amelia laughed behind him. It was a quiet, spontaneous moment, so simple and joyful that something broke deep inside of Gabriel. He leaned back in his chair, both hands in his hair, and whispered, "Oh God." The room felt colder, heavier. All the years he had told himself he wasn't made for family, all the moments he had said he didn't believe in love, it all came crashing down around him, with a single look at a small boy's face. A face that mirrored his own. The next morning, Gabriel didn't go to the office. Instead, he booked a flight to Vermont. His assistant was shocked, but he offered no explanations. He packed a bag quickly, not knowing what he was going to say or what he would find, only knowing that he couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. During the flight, he replayed every memory he had of Amelia. Her laugh in the stairwell, her paint-smudged fingers resting on his wrist, her look of disappointment that morning he left. He hated himself for not having called her, for assuming she would be fine without him, for never considering that she might have needed him. As the plane descended over the green hills and quiet towns of Vermont, Gabriel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the fear of failure or financial loss. This was something deeper. He was about to face the consequences of a decision he had made so easily, never imagining it would cost him a family he never knew he wanted. Maple Hill was so quiet, Gabriel felt as though he'd stepped into another world. The roads were narrow and wound gently through hills, painted in early autumn colors. The trees glowed with amber and crimson, and the air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. He drove through the small town in a rented SUV, following the directions he had jotted down from the gallery's website. It was located near the edge of town, surrounded by tall grass and an old picket fence that had clearly been hand-painted. The sign out front was simple: The Cole Gallery and Studio. No frills, no grand opening banner, just a name. Her name. He parked and sat in the car for a few minutes, unsure if he had the right to go inside. His heart was thumping uncomfortably in his chest, a foreign sensation for a man who had built his life on controlling every variable. But this wasn't business. This was the past crashing into the present, raw and unfiltered. Finally, he got out and walked toward the front door. The sound of gravel crunching under his shoes was unnaturally loud in the silence. He stopped with his hand on the handle, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The space inside was warm and modest, with wooden floors, exposed beams, and canvases that covered the walls like windows into Amelia's soul. He recognized her work instantly. Every painting felt like a memory trapped in color. A woman behind the counter looked up with a kind smile. "Welcome. Feel free to browse," she said softly. Gabriel nodded but didn't speak. His eyes scanned the gallery, searching for her, not knowing what he would say when he saw her. He didn't have to look for long. She appeared from the back room a moment later, holding a mug and adjusting the sleeve of her cardigan. Her hair was pulled back loosely. Strands fell around her face. And though she looked older, perhaps a little tired, she was still Amelia. Still stunning in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or clothes. She froze when she saw him. Her eyes widened. The color drained from her face, and the mug in her hand trembled slightly before she set it down on a nearby table. He stood still, unsure if he should speak first. He could see a dozen emotions crossing her face: surprise, confusion, hurt, and something else he couldn't name. "Amelia," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "Hello?" It sounded painfully small, almost absurd after 2 years of silence. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked slowly toward him, her steps cautious, like someone approaching a wounded animal. When she was close enough to look him in the eye, she asked, "What are you doing here, Gabe?" He swallowed, struggling to find the words. "I didn't know. About the gallery. About the child. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. His throat was too tight. Amelia crossed her arms, not in anger, but in preparation. "So now you know," she said quietly. "What do you want from us?" The word "us" hit him like a punch to the chest. She wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't just about her. There was a child now, his son. "I don't know what I want," he admitted honestly. I saw his picture, and I knew I had to come." Amelia said nothing for a long moment. Then, calmly and with precision, she said, "He's 2.5. His name is Oliver, and he is everything to me. You left before I even had a chance to tell you. Gabriel felt a wave of guilt so sharp it nearly buckled him. He looked at her. He really looked at her, and he saw the strength in her face, the quiet resilience. She had gone through pregnancy, childbirth, and raising a child without him. And still, she stood there, steady, unbroken. "I made a mistake," he said. "I thought I was protecting you, that I couldn't be that man, that I would only ruin getting everything if I stayed." His voice cracked slightly, and he hated how vulnerable he sounded. "I didn't realize what I was leaving. I didn't realize it would feel like this." Amelia's expression softened, but only a little. "What does it feel like exactly, Gabe? Regret? Curiosity? Or something real?" Her words weren't cruel. They were careful. She needed to know, and she had every right to ask. Before he could answer, a small voice from behind her called out, "Mama!" Amelia turned, and there he was, Oliver. He ran from the back hallway, his small sneakers thudding on the wooden floor. He had a crayon in one hand and a paint smudge on his shirt. When he saw Gabriel, he stopped abruptly and tilted his head, studying him. Gabriel knelt instinctively, unsure if the child would approach. Oliver looked at Amelia, then back at the stranger with the brown eyes that mirrored his own. "This is Mr. Gabriel," Amelia said softly, her voice strained but even. Oliver blinked. Then he held out the crayon to him, as if it were a peace offering. Gabriel took it, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hello, Oliver," he said softly. "I'm very happy to meet you." The boy didn't respond. He just stared at him for a long moment before turning and running back into the back room, as if he had decided that was enough for today. Gabriel stood up slowly, holding the crayon as if it were something sacred. Amelia watched him, and in her eyes, he saw something shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the first glimmer of possibility. Without another word, she walked to the door and opened it. He followed her. When he stepped outside, she said quietly, "I don't know what this means yet, but I need time and space. This isn't just about you anymore." He felt it, unable to argue. She looked at him one last time, then closed the door softly behind her. Gabriel stood on the porch, alone, holding a child's crayon in his hand, as if it weighed more than all the gold in his empire. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. The story continues below. A quiet beginning. Gabriel didn't leave Maple Hill that day. He couldn't. After seeing Oliver, after hearing Amelia say his name with such quiet strength and measured pain, something inside him changed so profoundly that even the thought of returning to his old life was unbearable. He checked into a small inn on the outskirts of town, a converted farmhouse with creaking doors and floral curtains, and he sat on the bed for what felt like hours, staring at the crayon Oliver had given him. It was orange, worn down, with bite marks on one end, a souvenir from a child who had his eyes, his hair, his presence, a child he didn't know existed until 24 hours ago. The next morning, after barely sleeping, Gabriel walked to the gallery. He didn't go inside. He stood across the street with a coffee in his hand, watching through the large front window as Amelia opened up. She didn't see him, or if she did, she didn't show it. Her movements were focused and precise, turning on lights, straightening paintings, adjusting a small display near the cash register. She looked like someone who had built something from nothing and guarded it with a quiet, daily dedication. Watching her ached inside him. He had missed it all. Her pregnancy, Oliver's birth, his first steps, his first words. The guilt was a physical thing now, pressing down on his chest. Later that day, he texted her. "Just one. I'm staying in town. I don't expect anything. I just want to talk. When you're ready." She didn't reply right away. A day passed, then two. On the third day, he was walking down the main street when he saw her leaving the small general store with a bag of apples and a bottle of milk. He instinctively offered to help, and to his surprise, she allowed him to take one of the bags. They walked side by side in silence for a while. She didn't ask why he was still there, and he didn't press her to talk. It was enough just to walk together, however tense the silence was between them. That night, she called him. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "If you want to talk, come by tomorrow morning. Oliver will be at daycare." He agreed without a moment's hesitation. The next morning, Gabriel returned to the gallery, but this time she led him to the small apartment upstairs. It was modest and full of warmth, with hand-painted walls, a few scattered toys, children's books neatly stacked on a small table. He could see the life she had built, room by room. She poured them both tea and sat across from him at the small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around the mug as if she needed the warmth to steady herself. "I don't hate you," she began, "but I can't pretend you didn't hurt me." Her voice didn't waver. "You made a choice, a very clear one, and I lived with the consequences while you went on building your empire." Gabriel listened without interrupting. He had expected anger, maybe tears, but the calm in her voice made it worse. It wasn't dramatized pain. It was the truth, unvarnished, just undeniable. "I know I don't deserve anything from you," he said softly, "but I need to say this. I made that decision out of fear. I didn't know how to love someone without losing control. I thought if I stayed with you, I would ruin it. So I left, thinking I was protecting you from me. But it was the worst decision I've ever made in my life." Amelia didn't reply right away. She took a sip of tea and looked out the window where the trees were just beginning to turn golden. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I raised him alone. Every decision, every fever, every night he woke up crying, I was there. And I kept thinking, not just about what you left me, but the man he could have had as a father if you had stayed. I want to be that man," Gabriel said, not pleading, but with honesty. "Even though I'm late, even though it's hard, I'm not here to ask for anything. I just want a chance to know him, to be there for him now." "And what happens when you get bored?" she asked, meeting his eyes. "When the novelty wears off and your real life calls you back? Will he have to wonder why the man with his eyes disappeared again?" He felt that question like a knife. "I won't disappear," he said. "Not again. I'm not who I was 2 years ago. I know it will take time to prove it. I don't expect you to trust me, but I'll earn it. Every single day if I have to." There was a long silence between them after that. There were no dramatic declarations, no sudden reconciliation. But something shifted. A crack in the wall. A breath of air through a window long closed. Amelia nodded slowly and said, "He loves books and airplanes. He builds things out of cereal boxes. Could you start there?" It wasn't an invitation. It was a test, a path forward. Narrow, but real. Gabriel didn't smile or thank her with exaggerated gratitude. He simply nodded, understanding the weight of what she was offering him. Do you think Gabriel can truly change? What do you think is the hardest part for Amelia? Share your thoughts below. A father's redemption in the days that followed. Gabriel showed up at the daycare door after class with small gifts. Paper airplanes, puzzle pieces, storybooks. He never pushed. He let Oliver decide how much space he would give him. At first, Oliver was shy, more curious than affectionate. But Gabriel didn't mind. He took what the child gave him. Quiet looks, brief smiles, tentative questions, and treasured them. He was rebuilding, not just his connection with his son, but the very foundation of the man he thought he was. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful or successful. He just felt human and alive. Oliver didn't accept Gabriel right away. and Gabriel didn't expect him to. The boy was cautious, observant, more thoughtful than most children his age. He would peek at Gabriel from behind Amelia's leg or a doorway, studying him with quiet curiosity, but keeping a safe distance. Gabriel respected that. He didn't try to win Oliver over with flashy gifts or forced affection. Instead, he showed up. Every day. Sometimes just for a few minutes after daycare. Sometimes for longer on weekends. He brought small things, a new set of crayons, a little hand-carved wooden airplane, a book with pages full of colorful animals. But more than anything, he brought consistency. He never missed a day. He never broke a promise. Amelia watched all this with a cautious heart. She didn't interfere. But she didn't discourage either. She let Oliver take the lead, let Gabriel do the work. And Gabriel did. He learned to build forts out of pillows and to make rockets out of cardboard boxes, just with tape and imagination. He sat on the floor and let Oliver paint his hands, his arms, even his face. He read aloud at bedtime. His voice trembled the first time Amelia allowed it, barely trusting himself to turn the pages. Sometimes he would stay after Oliver was asleep, just sitting on the couch with Amelia. The silence between them was now softer, almost companionable. One afternoon, Amelia found them outside, behind the gallery, where the backyard had been turned into a small play space. Oliver was trying to fix a small red toy tractor that had lost one of its wheels. He was frustrated, his small brows furrowed. Gabriel was crouched beside him with a tiny toolbox, showing him how to realign the axle. He spoke softly, explaining each step in a way Oliver could follow, his voice filled with a patience that Amelia had never seen in him before. When the wheel finally snapped back into place, Oliver jumped up, clapping. "You did it," he said, laughing. But then he paused, looked at Gabriel with those deep brown eyes, and added softly, "Thank you, Daddy." Amelia stood still where she was, her breath caught in her throat. Gabriel said nothing for a moment. His eyes widened, and something in his face shifted. Surprise. Then something heavier and rarer, like disbelief colliding with a yearning. He reached out slowly, not touching Oliver, but resting a hand gently on the repaired tractor. "You're welcome, buddy," he said, his voice low and steady, though Amelia could see his fingers were trembling slightly. That night, Gabriel sat in his car for almost an hour before going back to the inn. He didn't cry, not exactly, but something inside him broke open in a way it never had before. Being called Daddy felt nothing like any title or award he had ever received. It wasn't power. It wasn't prestige. It was love. Unfiltered, undeserved, and unimaginably precious. From that moment on, Oliver's guard came down more and more each day. He started running to the door when Gabriel arrived, asking if he could sit next to him at dinner, offering him small treasures, a heart-shaped rock, a drawing of the three of them holding hands, a crumpled flower he'd found near the gallery steps. He told Gabriel stories about his dreams and his nightmares, about the monster in the closet and the superhero he wanted to be. One night, as Gabriel tucked him into bed, Oliver whispered sleepily, "I'm glad you came back." Gabriel kissed his forehead and replied, "Me too, little man. Me too." Amelia watched all this with a heart that felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. She had built walls out of necessity, out of survival, and now those walls were being dismantled brick by brick, not with grand gestures, but with presence, with effort, with time. She had expected Gabriel to try and fail, or to try and leave, but instead, he stayed. Not just for Oliver, but for her too. He helped with the dishes, offered to pick up groceries, remembered her favorite tea, and brought it without being asked. He didn't pressure her for affection, didn't try to reclaim what they once had. He simply lived each day with a quiet honesty and patience, and she began to feel something she thought she had lost. Trust. One Saturday, after an early breakfast, the three of them walked to the farmer's market together. Oliver was perched on Gabriel's shoulders, clutching a bag of apples as if it were a prize. Amelia laughed when Gabriel pretended to be a horse, trotting through the grass, while Oliver squealed in delight. The townspeople started to notice, whispers following them, some kind, others skeptical. But Amelia didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt like part of a whole again, not just a single mother navigating the world with a small boy and a silent pain. That afternoon, as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows on the porch, Amelia sat beside Gabriel, while Oliver played with a toy truck nearby. The silence between them felt full, not empty. She looked at him for a long moment and said quietly, "You've changed." He didn't deny it. "I had to," he replied. "For him, for you, for me." She nodded, her eyes glistening with something akin to peace. And for the first time in a very long time, Amelia allowed herself to believe that maybe some stories didn't have to end in heartbreak. Maybe, just maybe, this one had only been on pause, waiting for the right chapter to begin. The story continues below. A life rebuilt, piece by piece. Autumn in Maple Hill grew colder as October wore on. But inside the gallery, everything felt a little warmer, a little more alive. Amelia's art was changing. Her brushstrokes had moved from sharp and stormy to softer, more layered, as if something inside of her had begun to heal. The new pieces filling the gallery were still honest and emotional, but now they carried light, subtle glimmers of hope woven into every canvas. Visitors noticed. More people began to stop by. A reporter from a regional art magazine featured her in a weekend article titled "The Heart of Maple Hill," and within days, Amelia's inbox was flooded with inquiries. She was surprised by the sudden attention, but she tried not to overthink it. She had grown used to doing things on her own, one step at a time. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Gabriel had orchestrated it all. He had anonymously contacted the magazine's editor, sending high-quality photographs of her work in a carefully worded note, praising the emotional depth and honesty of her art. He never signed his name. He didn't want credit. He didn't want to be a savior. He just wanted to remind the world of what he already knew, that she was extraordinary, that her talent deserved to be seen, not buried in a small-town gallery. He watched from a distance as her confidence began to grow again, how she stood a little taller during gallery openings and spoke about her work with a renewed fire in her voice. One afternoon, she found out. She overheard a phone call Gabriel had stepped outside to take, his voice low but unmistakable. He was thanking the editor for helping her to see herself as others saw her. Amelia stood still behind the gallery door, a hand to her chest. When he came back inside, she confronted him quietly, without anger. "It was you," she said. "The article, the attention. You did it all." Gabriel looked down, caught. "I didn't do it for credit," he said. "I did it because the world needs to see what I see every time I look at your work. I wanted you to remember what it feels like to be seen, not just as a mother or a gallery owner, but as an artist. You haven't lost that, not by a long shot." For a long moment, Amelia said nothing. Then she walked toward him slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "You're still doing this," she said. "Not just for Oliver, but for me. and it's making it really hard to keep you at a distance." He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just waited, breathing silently, letting her take the lead. She stopped inches from him and whispered, "I don't know what this is or what it's supposed to be, but I know you've changed, and I know you mean it." Gabriel reached for her hand, gently lacing his fingers through hers. "I don't want to rewrite the past," he said. "I just want a chance to build something better from here." They stood like that for a while, close but unhurried, cautious but no longer afraid. Amelia didn't make any promises. She wasn't ready for promises. But that night, after Oliver was asleep and the gallery was closed and silent, she invited Gabriel to stay for tea. They sat on the couch with their mugs, talking in low voices, their shoulders brushing from time to time. She told him about her dreams before motherhood, about the gallery she once hoped to open in Manhattan. He told her about his childhood, his loneliness, the pressure to succeed. They didn't kiss, but the space between them felt full of things waiting to blossom. The next morning, Oliver ran into the living room, hair tousled and a book in his arms, clambering into Gabriel's lap without hesitation. "Read this," he demanded, shoving the book into Gabriel's hands. Gabriel smiled and began to read, his voice soft and animated. Amelia watched from the kitchen doorway, holding her mug, her chest swelling with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, hope. In the weeks that followed, they continued to live in the gray space between what had been and what could be. Some days were easy. They laughed together, cooked together. They even managed to visit a pumpkin patch, the three of them, where Oliver rode on Gabriel's shoulders, and Amelia snapped a photo she would later print and frame. Other days were harder. Amelia would withdraw sometimes, haunted by the memory of being left. Gabriel gave her space. He never pushed, but he always reminded her with his actions that this time, he wasn't going anywhere. One night during a cold storm, the power flickered and went out. Amelia lit candles and wrapped Oliver in a blanket, settling him on the couch. Gabriel built a fire in the fireplace without being asked. Then he sat beside them. In the soft, flickering light, surrounded by warmth and quiet, it felt, for the first time, like home. The townspeople started to talk, of course. Some were skeptical, others cautiously supportive. But Amelia didn't care. She had spent too long worrying about appearances. Now all that mattered was the small, growing truth she was building with the man who had once broken her heart and was now showing up every day to mend it. There was no dramatic moment, no grand gesture that sealed their reunion. It happened in layers, through shared stories, cooked dinners, cleaned up messes, read bedtime books, and the quiet comfort of two people learning to trust each other again. And at some point, without even realizing it, Amelia stopped waiting for something to go wrong. She stopped doubting his presence. She started letting him stay. Spring came to Maple Hill in a slow unfurling of color, the snow retreating into memory as green silently spread over the hills and fields. The trees outside the gallery blossomed in soft whites and pinks, and Amelia would open the windows each morning to let the breeze carry in the scent of thawing earth and new beginnings. Everything felt lighter now, not just in the air, but in their lives. Months had passed since Gabriel first returned, and while no formal declarations had been made, their small family had begun to find a rhythm, marked not by big moments, but by the gentle accumulation of small ones. Gabriel had rented a house just down the road, not because Amelia had asked him to leave, but because he wanted to give her space, to let this new chapter unfold naturally. Still, most afternoons found him at her door, often with dinner, or something Oliver had left at his place. Sometimes he stayed late, sometimes he didn't. There was no pressure, just presence. Weekends were spent together, hiking the woods behind town, playing board games in the kitchen, or building elaborate pillow forts that took up the entire living room. Oliver called them castle days, and Amelia found herself laughing in a way she hadn't since before motherhood. Freely, unreservedly, truly. Gabriel had changed in subtle and profound ways. He no longer constantly checked his phone. The ambition that once defined him entirely was still there, but it no longer consumed him. He still flew to New York once a month for company business, but he always returned with a treat for Oliver and a bouquet of wildflowers for Amelia. He didn't try to impress her with wealth or promises, only with time, consistency, and a quiet care. He offered to fix things around the gallery, read business articles over breakfast, and insisted she raise her prices when a collector tried to haggle. He saw her, not just as a mother or an artist, but as a woman. Strong, brilliant, and completely deserving of more than she had ever dared to hope for. One afternoon, as the three of them sat in the backyard, Oliver lying on the grass with his sketch pad, and Amelia planting herbs along the fence, Gabriel walked up with something in his hand. It wasn't a ring, not yet, but it was a small silver key, tied with a blue ribbon. She looked at him, perplexed, and he knelt beside her, gently brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "It's to the house," he said. "Only if you want it. I'd like to think it's yours too. Ours even. Eventually." She took the key, turning it over in her hand. There was no dramatic music, no tearful embrace. She simply leaned in and kissed him. Softly, tenderly, like a response spoken in a language only they understood. Oliver, oblivious to the quiet shift in the moment, continued to draw clouds and trees, occasionally lifting his head to ask for new colors. The gallery thrived in the months that followed. Amelia had a solo exhibition in a nearby larger town, and Gabriel stood in the back during her speech, clapping with quiet pride. He didn't introduce himself as her partner or Oliver's father. He simply let her shine, knowing she didn't need anyone to complete her, only someone to see her completely. Finally, Amelia did move in. It happened not with fanfare, but with boxes brought over one by one, a crib reassembled in Gabriel's guest room, and coffee mugs that slowly migrated from her kitchen to his. Oliver adjusted with ease, treating the transition as an adventure. He loved having his books in two places, his toys in two corners of the same house. And every night, as both his parents tucked him in together, he fell asleep to the sound of their voices, wrapped in the quiet security of a life that had, at last, come together. One night, as they sat on the porch watching Oliver chase fireflies with a jar in his hand, Amelia turned to Gabriel and said, "I used to think that stories like this didn't exist, that people don't change, that the damage we do is final." Gabriel looked at her, not with guilt or apology, but with a deepness. "People don't always change," he said. "But sometimes they wake up. Sometimes they find their way back before it's too late." She reached for his hand and laced her fingers with his, feeling the strength there, the stability. "You came back," she whispered. He nodded. "You let me." Oliver ran to them then, breathless and wild with excitement, his jar glowing with flickering light. "Look, Mama! Look, Daddy!" he cried, holding it up like a treasure. They both leaned in to admire it, their heads nearly touching, their laughter mixing in the warm night air. Amelia looked at Gabriel, who was already looking at her, and for the first time, she felt that the story wasn't about what they had lost, but about what they had chosen to build together, one imperfect piece at a time. The future didn't scare her anymore. It didn't feel like a risk or a question mark. It felt like this, roots in the ground, light in the windows, laughter echoing in rooms that once only knew silence. And as they sat there, wrapped in a quiet joy that needed no explanation, Amelia knew, at last and completely, that they had all come home. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it to spread the message of hope and redemption.